Hello and welcome to another TLDR US video. Good news, the election is tomorrow. People all over the US will be going to the polls to cast their votes. Well, unless they're one of the more than 90 million people who have already done so. But in many states, people are not only voting for president, but also for Congress. As we discussed in a video last week, there's the possibility of a Democratic trifecta, them winning the presidency, retaining control of the House of Representatives, and winning the Senate. And this is a real possibility, so it's important to cover all of the races this year, as Republicans are going to be incredibly keen to maintain their majority. In this video, we'll take you through a few of the 35 total Senate races that are most likely to see a change in senator, so you know which ones to keep an eye on election night. As I said, there's only one day left until the election, so surely you're already subscribed to the channel to make sure you don't miss a thing. Well, it seems that 73% of you haven't. So if you haven't already, hit subscribe and rung the bell, please do so. It helps us out, but it also means you get more of our content, and we can help you untangle what could potentially be a complicated election. We released a video on the 4th of September which covered some of the key Senate races to watch, and this will provide the basis of what we look at here. But a lot has changed since then, as the final months of campaigning have heated up. When we last talked about this, the chance of the Senate changing hands was 60%, according to 538. Now, using the same metric, it's increased to 76%. Currently, the Senate is made up of 53 Republicans, 45 Democrats, and 2 independents who tend to caucus with the Democrats, with a Republican vice president able to cast a tie-breaking vote. Looking at the specific forecasted numbers, again courtesy of 538, the most likely outcome is the Democrats winning 51 of 100 seats, although the chance of 52 is almost equal. So here's how the map looks going into Election Day. Red boxes represent Republican senators who are not up for re-election, and the blue boxes are Democratic senators who are not up for election this cycle. Grey boxes represent the elections. So if we minimise the safe senators, here are all of the Senate races taking place in 2020, all 35 of them. Now let's colour them based on 538's predictions. As always, red is Republican and blue is Democrat. And the darkness of the hue shows just how likely each race is to go either way. You might notice that 3 of the boxes are still grey. Well, those are all the toss-ups, meaning that 538 says it's too close to tell who's going to win at this point. Right, now that's all established, let's look at some of the important individual races, the ones which are close and the ones which are most likely to flip. We'll discuss them in the order of their likelihood of flipping from one party to another. So let's start with the easy ones, or at least they're supposed to be easy. We start with Gardner versus Hickenlooper in Colorado. Incumbent Senator Gardner is, by all accounts, going to lose his job soon. He's facing off against former Denver Mayor, Governor of Colorado, and Democratic primary candidate John Hickenlooper. That's quite the resume. Hickenlooper has had a consistent, healthy lead in the polls, and this lead is trending up in the last month. This all looks pretty set for a Republican to Democrat change, with 538 giving it an 85% chance of this going Hickenlooper's way. Jones versus Tuberville. Things aren't looking all rosy for the Democrats though, as we mentioned earlier. Alabama is not exactly the modern-day heartland of the Democratic Party. Far be it, in fact, and therefore it's set to be a bit of a bump in the road. We don't have time to go over the infamous 2017 election between Democrat Doug Jones and Republican Roy Moore, but the reason for the Democratic win was less about the party and more about the flaws of the particular Republican candidate, and therefore it's expected to flip back red this time round. Anyway, because that was a special election, Jones's seat is up after only 3 years, and he's heavily predicted to lose to popular former Auburn football coach Tommy Tuberville. Polls have been predicting a very consistent win for Tuberville, and he's given an 85% chance of winning. As we say in the UK, this is one of the seats where a party's support is so skewed in one direction, you could probably pin a red rosette on a donkey and they'd still win the election. McSally versus Kelly. For the final seat that's in the very likely column to change hands is that currently held by Martha McSally in Arizona. This was formerly the late great John McCain's seat and has been in Republican hands since 1968. However, Democratic challenger and more excitingly former spaceman Mark Kelly is set to buck that trend and win the seat. He's had a very steady 5-point plus polling gap and is given a 79% chance of winning right now, so not a whole lot of drama expected there. So that's the two seats the Democrats need to win pretty much locked in, but we at TLDR are not in the business of forecasting, hence the humble reliance on geniuses like 538 and elsewhere, so we don't want to go much further with assigning seats. That's because it becomes much harder to accurately speculate as we get to some of these closer toss-up races. So our advice will be to watch out for them on Tuesday night. If the Democrats get at least two of these, there's a good chance they have the Senate, depending on the presidency. If the Republicans can do the unthinkable and win all the remaining races, then they'll keep the Senate. So let's go through some of these tight races that we can't yet predict. First up is Tillis versus Cunningham. Although this is a tight race, this is one of the ones with the higher chances of flipping, and it's in North Carolina between incumbent Republican Tom Tillis and Democratic challenger Cal Cunningham. Tillis has historically been quite skeptical of Trump, but as time has gone on, has become a bit more buddy-buddy with the president in order to attract his base. It was all going very well for the challenger until he was involved in a sexting scandal, which threatened to dent his hopes. But in reality, it doesn't seem to have done. The polls haven't really changed that much in the last few months, and Cunningham is still up, although it should be said that his lead is generally still within the margin of error. Cunningham is given a 64% chance of flipping the Senate for the Democrats by 538, and the Republicans know how important this state could be. Trump, Mike Pence, Ted Cruz and Nikki Haley are just some of the GOP big hitters that have been campaigning with Tillis. This race has also been one of the most expensive in history, with the candidates spending more than $250 million between them. Just ridiculous numbers, really. They'll both be hoping the money is well spent, and this is one to clearly keep an eye on. Next, we have Loeffler, Warnock and Collins. This is one of the more complicated battles, and one of the ones you can probably put at the back of your mind for the moment. And it's one of our two Senate races taking place in Georgia. It involves multiple candidates from both parties, due to state laws, and because of this variety of candidates, both parties' votes are split, and polls are very topsy-turvy. The other quirk in Georgia is that the winner is not the person who gets the most votes. They have to get 50% of the vote. Otherwise, no one wins, and there's a runoff between the two top candidates on January 5th. There's a strong possibility that that's what's going to happen in this election. And it could be between Democrat Reverend Raphael Warnock and incumbent Republican Kelly Loeffler, or Warnock and the other Republican, Doug Collins. This is really one that's hard to predict or even speculate on due to the nature of the race, so it's probably best if we just leave it and let you watch how it plays out on election night. There is definitely a chance that Warnock is able to flip the seat, but any winner is probably not going to be known until January. Collins versus Gideon. Now, this is a race that's not in 270 to win's toss-up bracket, but it is a very close race, and one that surely should be considered a toss-up. Right now, 538 gives Democratic challenger Sarah Gideon a 59% chance of winning Susan Collins' main Senate seat, and 270 to win says that it's currently leaning Democrat. It's been a tough few years for Senator Collins, with her going from, according to one study, being the second most popular senator in 2015 to one of the least popular now. She's quite a moderate Republican, who has traditionally had a broad church of support from within her state. She's been in power since 1996, and to be honest, she's wiped the floor with opponents in Senate races since. But this time, it looks like it's going to be different. US politics is so polarised at the moment, and she's been struggling to attain the levels of support she usually gets, having been punished in the polls by non-Republicans for voting to confirm Brett Kavanaugh a few years ago, and not to impeach Trump. To give an idea of how tight this race is, and how important Collins sees appealing across party lines, she was the only Republican to vote against the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett, potentially representing her hope to appeal to Democratic voters once again. Ernst versus Greenfield. Now we move on to probably the tightest Senate race, and it's in Iowa between Senator Joni Ernst and Democrat Teresa Greenfield. Right now it looks like a dead heat, and polls have been going up and down and round and round. Greenfield has been favoured for a while now in 538's forecast, but before that Ernst was favoured, and now it's basically 50-50. This one's anyone's guess, but it could end up being crucial. Perdue versus Ossoff. We return to Georgia now for another close one in the Peach State between Republican incumbent David Perdue and Democrat Jon Ossoff. Perdue is the likely winner and retains an aggregate polling lead, but this race has been a lot closer in the last week. Recently, the chances of Perdue retaining his seat were over 70% according to 538, but now this chance is under 60%. Like the other race in Georgia, this one could come down to a runoff, and there's a good chance we might not see the result on election night. Daines versus Bullock. The last of our toss-up states is in Montana, where the odds are that it remains Republican, with incumbent Steve Daines holding around a 67% chance of retaining his seat. But that's a bit close for comfort for the GOP. Challenger Steve Bullock is up in some polls, but Daines does have the aggregate lead, a lead which he's had and kept throughout the campaign. Definitely this is the least likely of the ones we've covered to change hands, but there's still the possibility. So there you have it. What do you think of these Senate races? Will the Democrats win the trifecta, or can the GOP pull off a crazy upset? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Oh, and please make sure that you vote. There's a link to vote.org in the description with all of the details you might need on election day. So regardless of who you're voting for, be sure to vote. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so we can unpick what happened on election night and in the days following. Also, special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. To see your name at the end of videos, be sure to back us on Patreon. The link to that's in the description.